All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really wild theory, one that's incredibly detailed and claims to have pinpointed the exact date of Judgment Day. It uses this whole web of calculations, prophecies, and numerology. So let's just jump right in. Shut down the government indefinitely. Yeah, that's a pretty intense statement, right? And according to the source material we're looking at, it's not some political talking point. It's the result of a prophecy. And believe it or not, that's just one tiny piece of this whole puzzle we're about to put together. So this theory, it makes a very specific claim that Judgment Day is going to happen on Friday, November 5th, 2027. Now, our job here isn't to say if this is right or wrong. We're just going to walk through the proof that the source documents lay out, all the timelines, the ancient texts, the whole thing.
Okay, so where do you even start with a theory like this? Well, it all comes down to a core prophecy, one about judgment, and it focuses on one specific person and one very specific date that the source says was calculated with, divine accuracy. All right, here's the absolute core of it. The foundational claim is that a man by the name of Alex Enrique Campaign is the reincarnation of Jesus Christ and is here to act as the divine judge. And according to these documents, everything else, all the math, all the other proofs, it's all built to back up this one single idea.
And we're not talking about some vague someday in the future kind of thing. Nope. This theory is built around a super specific endpoint, November 5th, 2027. So you gotta ask, right? How in the world did they land on that date? Well, the source says the answer is all in the timeline.
This is what everything else stands on. The source calls it the 666-month timeline. This calculation is supposedly the main mathematical bridge connecting the person to the prophesied event.
Okay, so here's the basic math laid out for you. The timeline starts with the birth of Alex Enrique Campaign on May 5th, 1972. It ends on the supposed Judgment Day, November 5th, 2027. The whole thing hinges on the numbers in the middle. From his birth to that Judgment Day, it's 20,273 days. And that, according to the source, is exactly 666 months. To the day.
And that, of course, brings us to the number 666. Now, we all know what that number usually means, right? The number of the beast. But this theory, it spins it a different way. Here, they say it doesn't represent evil. Instead, it marks the end of a long period of trouble, and it's the trigger for the final judgment on all the world's systems.
But they don't stop there. The theory claims there's even more hidden in the numbers, what it calls a number 5 signature. So check this out. If you take that total day count, 20,273, and add up the digits, 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 7 plus 3, you get 14. And then 1 plus 4 equals 5. They say you find that same 14 pattern in his birth time, 1:40 a.m. And all of this, they claim, is proof that points right back to his birthday, May 5th.
And there's another layer of this number patterning they point out. Look at the years. 1972 and 2027. They're presented as this kind of mirror image. The 27 in 2027 is the exact reverse of the 72 in 1972. The theory says that's no accident. It's a deliberate encoded link. Okay, so we've got the timeline math, but the theory also pulls in what it calls historical and prophetic proof. And this is where it gets really interesting, because it involves two key documents from the Vatican, one that's super old and one that's much more recent. All right, so on one hand, you have this 900-year-old prophecy. It's called the Prophecy of the Popes, supposedly from Saint Malachi. The theory claims this old text points to 2027 as the year a dreadful judge arrives. And then, on the other hand, you've got an official declaration from the Vatican made in 1972. The source says, hey, look at the timing. They call it a prophetic safeguard that was put out in the exact same year this person was born.
So this 1972 declaration, its purpose was to lay out the official beliefs on the nature of Christ. But the theory says its real purpose was to be a kind of theological test, timed perfectly by a higher power. The argument is that this very specific definition, one single person with both a divine and a human nature, was put in place to make sure that when a returned Messiah appeared, people wouldn't just write him off as a regular guy with a special connection to God.
All right, so we've covered prophecy. Now the theory moves into what it calls its strongest evidence. The stuff it claims is just irrefutable, mathematical proof. And to do this, it uses a very specific tool to connect names, dates, and big ideas. And that tool is called gematria. It's a really old practice.
Basically, you assign a number to every letter in a word or a name, add them all up, and that final number is supposed to show you hidden links to other words or phrases that have the exact same value.
And the source material is not shy about this stuff. It presents these gematria findings with total confidence. It pretty much says, look, this isn't up for debate. Just like 2 + 2 is 4, these number connections are factual, absolute truths. It's like a hidden divine language.
And this right here is the main example the source uses. Using a standard method, the full name Alex Enrique Campion, the phrase, the birth of Christ, and the Holy Son of God all supposedly add up to the same number, 188. And again, the theory doesn't say, what a coincidence. It says this is mathematical proof that these things are one and the same.
But it doesn't end there. They take this math a step further using something called a Strong's Concordance, which is basically a super detailed dictionary for every single word in the Bible. The theory claims that the numbers they get from the name link up perfectly with the reference numbers for specific words in the Bible, and all those words have to do with judgment, justice, and divine punishment. And it's not just the person's name they do this with. They apply the same method to the date itself. So according to the source, the phrase November 5th has the same numerical value as phrases like the Punisher and downfall. But then November 5, just a slight change, supposedly equals Great Awakening and Heaven on Earth. It's meant to show the two sides of what will happen.
Okay, so if you were to follow all this, the timeline, the prophecies, the math, where does it all end up? What's the point? Well, the last part of the theory lays out the consequences, and they are huge. And it says these aren't just possibilities, they're inevitable.
For all of us, for humanity, it's presented as a really clear 3-step deal. Step 1. The world we live in now has a hard expiration date. Step 2. Every single person has to make a final choice. Get on board with this truth, or, and these are the source's words, get deleted from existence. And then step 3, for those who made the right choice, there's a great awakening that leads to heaven on earth.
And if you're a world leader, the message is even more direct. The theory is very clear. On that day, November 5th, 2027, every single form of human government and authority is just over, done, null and void.
And that, right there, brings us full circle. That quote from the beginning, shut down the government indefinitely, the source presents that as a divine order, not a suggestion. It's the direct result of Judgment Day, when all human power structures are just wiped away.
So you can see how this theory pulls together so many different threads, dates, old prophecies, really complex number games to build its case. It just keeps showing you pattern after pattern and insists this is proof. And that leaves us with one big question to think about. When you see all these intricate patterns line up in history, in prophecy, in numbers, where's the line between it all being a massive coincidence and it being some kind of real, divine message?